Welcome to the CAVE 2020 virtual community and our first webinar in a series of special speakers being made available to our CAVE 2020 virtual community. I'm Jan Gustafson Correa, CEO for CAVE. And while I really wish we were together today in San Francisco for the start of CAVE 2020, I hope you find yourself today in a safe place, managing the circumstances of COVID-19 and ready to join together with your CAVE Familia today and over the next several weeks via the CAVE 2020 virtual community website and webinars. Our very first webinar is being presented today by our wonderful friend and expert in language and literacy, none other than Sylvia Dorta Duque de Reyes, and being sponsored by the generous support and contributions of Benchmark Education, a gold level sponsor of CAVE 2020. Sylvia will be joined today by Elizabeth Pappas, also of Benchmark, during the Q&A section of the webinar, and we extend a warm welcome to both Elizabeth and Sylvia. So as we get ready for today's exciting session, I have a few housekeeping matters to share. As this is a webinar, we want to remind you that the speakers' microphones will be active and you as participants will all be on mute. If you would like to pose a question during the presentation, please use the question and answer icon on the Zoom control menu at the bottom of your screen, and a question and answer window will pop up where you'll be able to type in your questions or comments. So again, please use the Q&A icon to enter any questions or comments. For better focus during today's presentation, we will not be using or responding to the chat icon or window for today. After the webinar, we'll be posting the recorded session on the CAVE 2020 virtual community website, so you can re-listen and share with others as well. So now I invite you to sit back, relax, and get ready for 45 minutes of powerful engagement and learning. It gives me such great pleasure to introduce you all today to our very wonderful Sylvia Dorta Duque de Reyes, who will be presenting today on Cross-Linguistic Transfer, the Spanish-English Connection. Join me in giving a big welcome and bienvenida to Sylvia. Sylvia? So Sylvia, I'm going to ask you 1 second to check your mute button.
Okay. Let me just once. I'm not muted.
You sound fabulous. You sound wonderful.
Okay, good.
Again, welcome, Sylvia. Welcome.
Welcome. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is welcome everybody and thank CAVE and Benchmark Education for providing us with this great opportunity to continue feeling our community and learning together. And so without any further ado, I'm going to present to you several strategies for cross-linguistic transfer. And I don't know why I cannot move my, okay, here we go. And I will present the sound spelling transfer kit. So we're going to be, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to review our understanding of cross-linguistic transfer. Then I'm going to show you a lesson and we're going to be looking at some instructional sequences and some strategies for cross-linguistic transfer. And then we are going to look at assessment. The first thing that we want to consider is what is cross-linguistic transfer? So take a moment to reflect and think about what you already know about cross-linguistic transfer. And where do you stand with all of its complexity? We know from Eleanor Thonis that she said that regular transfer means the application of something that you know to a new experience. Well, cross-linguistic transfer means the understanding between two languages, the relationship between two languages. What you already know in one language, you can use to learn the other. And she mentioned that there was a positive, partial, negative, and zero relationship between the two languages. So the positive means like the cognates, the similarity of learning of the language, the concept, the rules, all of that construct is very much the same. For example, cognates. Partial means when you have this construct, like question marks, let's say, and questioning, and then at the, you have questioning marks. And then of course, when you apply, you all know that in Spanish, we use question marks at the beginning and at the end of a question, and in English, only at the end. But what we're trying to explain here is that these differences, as you compare the two languages, these differences have to be explicitly taught to students. All right, so but then the teachers ask me, but Sylvia, but when do we do this? How do we do this? And so Dr. Jill Kerper-Mora and myself, we are using the language subsystems as the framework for cross-linguistic transfer. These subsystems are phonology. What does that mean? Well, it means that the alphabetical languages have sounds. So when we are increasing our metalinguistic skills in two languages, we're actually compare English and Spanish at the phonological level, the music of the language, the sounds of the language. Kindergarten and first grade teachers know this well. Orthography is those sounds get mapped onto print. Morphology, words have meaningful parts and they get compounded. Semantics is vocabulary, the meaning that we have for words. Syntactic, the predictable order of words. Grammar, the words and their functions. And pragmatic, how you use language in your culture to communicate given specific audiences and situations. So as you can see, in our curriculum, we address these at different parts of our curriculum, right? So there's a time where we're going to actually connect and study particular subsystems at one time. So we also have the linguistic interdependence hypothesis by Jim Cummings. And what is that? What exactly does that mean? And he has pointed out for over 40 years now that we have, that the two languages, that languages are interdependent, that green triangle where he termed the common underlying operating system. And these two languages have a relationship, and we have basic interpersonal communication skills, but it is at the cognitive academic language proficiency level that we have the most depth in being able to use this cross-linguistic transfer. So we also have research findings. We have Diane August, Margarita Carlo, and Margarita Calderon have talked about the effects of transfer from Spanish to English. And so we need to, in our own minds, we need to think, okay, do we believe in cross-linguistic transfer? Do we believe in explicitly teaching it? Do we assume it's going to happen? Are the two languages integrated, or are they isolated? One bubble Spanish, one bubble English? Do we promote biliteracy? Do we promote learning the two languages and comparing and contrasting them? Or do we hold back and say, no, until you learn all of this, then you can learn this other? Do we have a common, or do we have separate cognition and proficiency in language? Can this happen simultaneously, or does it always have to happen sequentially? So these are things that we are, as a field, thinking about and trying to understand better. The guiding principles for dual language education are pointing out in strands 3 that instruction in one language builds on concepts learned in the other language, that instruction promotes metalinguistic awareness and metacognitive skills, and that the instruction needs to leverage the students' bilingualism through these cross-linguistic strategies. And our own framework in California is pointing out that rather than leaving this cross-linguistic transfer up to chance, teachers should approach the transfer strategically and intentionally. So let's look at how we then go about to doing that. We have the idea that we're going to teach in one language. We're then going to be able to bridge it to the next language. And it's that bridge that provides the opportunity for instruction for cross-linguistic language instruction. And then you face towards the L2. So this is a relationship that goes back and forth. And as it goes back and forth, then students are able to understand the relationship between the two languages at each of their grade levels. We do have a lesson structure that has a gradual release of responsibility. You do want to do an orientation, your presentation, a structured practice, collaborative practice, and then move on to see that transferred independence. So let's look and review and reflect on this research. You have to first think, what squares with your beliefs? What are questions that are going around in your mind? What are points to remember? So take a moment to reflect and chat. Think about how you, what do you understand about these things? Because one of the things that we know is that unless you understand and are at peace and can want to manage these strategies, you can, and believe in them, you then can implement them. And then of course, there's that second part of implementation where there are levels of implementation. You might start dwelling in this cross-linguistic transfer little by little. And then improve and learn more and practice. And that is what we're hoping to do. So we do want to give you some community support. And if you can do the hashtag cross-linguistic transfer, we can maybe continue our conversations. And we will provide other forums where we can, through Facebook, through other webinars, through through websites, we will continue this conversation. So then, let's think about organizing instruction for transfer. We did that. And so let's look at a little mini lesson that we're going to go and we're going to take you with the sound spelling cards from Spanish to English. Let's see how that goes. So we have a spelling sound transfer kit that Benchmark has, and we offer that to you. What I want you to learn here is the strategies and the techniques. Our sound spelling cards, as you can see, have the orange ones are in Spanish and the blue ones are in English, and they have a green border. When the cards have a green border, those indicate that this sound and spelling are transferable for both English and Spanish. When they do not have the green border, it means that they are non-transferable. So the teacher can quickly, and the students can quickly discern what it is that the cards, what are the transferable sounds and what are not the transferable sounds. On the back of the card, you have all kinds of information for the teacher to have right there on demand and be able to teach and refer to the routines. So let's start. We have, let's say that you're introducing the sound spelling and you're gonna do something like tomate, tomate con sal y aguacate. Escuchen este sonido, t, díganlo conmigo, t, díganlo solitos, t, díganlo alto, t, díganlo bajito. T. ¿Cómo se llama esta letra? Esta letra se llama T, T mayúscula, T minúscula, tomate, tomate con sal y aguacate. So you have these little routines that the students are going to be able to internalize and learn and have fun with it. And you're going to want to recognize the names of all of these cards. We have cards that you are going to then refer to the cards. It's audio visual, and you're going to say, okay, tomate, and comienza con T, right? And tenedor, and títere, and tortuga. So what other words do we have that start with T like tomate, right? And you're going to have the students then generate words. So this is a little routine you're going to introduce, and you're going to have them think about the words that they can come up with. Now, with these beautiful visuals, give you the opportunity to create that sound and symbol relationship from the word level, from the sound level to the letter level, to the syllable, to the word level. And so, of course, part of another strategy and another routine is that you are going to be able to clap every single word. You're going to be able to syllabicate, and therefore increasing that auditory memory and that auditory relationship with the words and the letters. We can create these beautiful word walls, and you can collect words, you can do word hunts, you can do text search, and you can have a bank of words that are supported by the visuals on top. So you have tate tito tu, and then you have 2-syllable words, 3-syllable words, and then words that start with consonant, vowel, consonant. So you can see how this is going to continue to grow, and how your students are going to acquire vocabulary as well as the sound symbol relationships. Now, having things in just at the letter level is not good enough. We want to take this into meaning making. We want to do sound spelling in context. We want to do language play. We want to learn about careers. So we have a book called ABC, El Abecedario de Profesiones, and in English, the ABC of Professions, that have these beautiful little poems and chants where the students can circle and they can recognize the sound and look for the words that start with T. And because it's professions, they can visualize these future achievements, and we can learn about future achievements of their own and explore different professions. So you have the idea that we are going to look at, the different professions, but the meaning making. So you have a few little text dependent questions to make sure that the students are learning and that they are bringing all of this phonological and orthological understanding right to print, right? To understanding print. We always want to play with language. So you want to be able to have all of these, little, what do you say, adivinanzas, riddles in English, and you can use the cards that you have to create these riddles. Like, for instance, un instrumento musical, el tambor, right? So, un animal que camina muy lento, la tortuga, el hermano de tu papá, tu tío, algo que comemos con una cuchara y un tenedor. And again, you have the visuals to make this come alive. Now we're going to look at comparing and contrasting this T, right? Which we already know is transferable. But we're going to ask the students, ¿qué indica el borde verde? What does the green border indicate? El borde verde indica que esta letra es igual y tiene el mismo sonido en inglés y en español. Okay, y yo puedo comprender, and this is for the a little bit the other kids, the first graders can already start thinking about, yo puedo comprender que en inglés la ED también suena T. Okay, so it means that you're going to be looking at these and you're going to be establishing that relationship. When do you do this? Well, again, during bridging time. You can do this at the end of your phonics time. You can do this at the beginning of ELD. You can do this in a way that you bridge the concepts that have been learned in one language, you bridge them to the next. Okay, so then let's affirm it at the language level, at the word level. Tambor, you have the words there, and now let's do that cross-linguistic using cognates. La palabra en español es tigre, y en inglés, the students will chime out the cognates. Teléfono, and then the students will chime out telephone. Triángulo, and the students will chime out the rest. So you have the cognates, and you can study the cognates. You can then go to English and have that similarity of learning condition with the English, and then be able to say, look, boys and girls, in English, we have other words that start with T that are not cognates. And so what did we learn? We learned that the letter sound and the letter itself are the same in English and in Spanish, that some words start with the T, also start with T in English, and that some words are cognates, but not all the words are cognate. So these are things that can be discussed and talked about at the kindergarten and first grade level. The students are able to do all kinds of activities. This is from Kathy Escamilla, who is always saying, okay, we have to realize cómo se dice muñeca en inglés. Okay, pues muñeca se dice doll, right? So the idea is that we're giving the students all this assessment and showing them a picture and asking them to come up with the first sound of that, the first letter of the word. And our children need the opportunity to understand that this is muñeca in Spanish, but it's doll in English. Two different sounds. So the vocabulary has to be taught simultaneously so that the students understand all this vocabulary, all this freaking vocabulary in both English and in Spanish. And when do we give them the opportunity to negotiate this learning? Well, that would happen during bridging time. And so you can do all kinds of things with these materials, the cards, the words across the languages. You can connect with the home and have these activity sheets so that the students can participate and also learn. So now let's look at assessment a little bit, because this is really important. Again, from Kathy Escamilla, we learned that assessment has to have an additive approach, that the students have two languages and they can use their resources in order to become biliterate. And we need to monitor that trajectory. And we monitor that trajectory in an with an additive perspective, like Jim Cummings always pointed out. So we have the dictado, which is, it's a traditional Spanish way to be able to have concretely evidence that the students can have this word, affirm that relationship between the sound, the letters, and the words and their meaning. So we also have the idea that, the children are going to approximate and they're going to maybe use the first language system as they're learning the second one, and they're going to have some absent phonemes. And we learn a lot from having that evidence, and we're able to analyze those approximations. And then we're able to observe how they are moving along, and we're able to see how they're processing the two sound spelling systems, and we're able to then discern and talk to them about it. So what we are proposing is that we have different levels and how we face in or do this cross-linguistic transfer. In the level A would be your transferable sounds. In a 90-10 or a 50-50, you're starting with, learning the Spanish alphabet. Well, we have about 13 sound spellings that are shared between English and Spanish. Let's focus on those. And then we can go into the next level, which would be the non-transferable sound spelling. And this would be sort of like in first grade, where we can study how they are not the same, but we already have enough background that we can actually do this compare and contrast. And we have the lessons for that. Then level C would be then a lot of those special English letter sounds that are not patterns in Spanish, and they are the vowel diagraphs. So this is like a facing in approach to cross-linguistic transfer, so that by the end of second grade, the students have a complete background on both the English and the Spanish sound spelling system. Because as we're sort of doing it right now, we're almost assuming that if we teach all of this in Spanish, by the end of second grade, they're going to be able to transfer and practice all this sound spelling, all the vocabulary, all the letter patterns in Spanish and in English. And I think that we have an innovative approach that can help us all do better and help our students be able to become biliterate and have that foundation in both languages. So kinder level A, transferable sounds. First grade, level B, non-transferable sounds. Second grade, English specific sounds. And of course, they continue their Spanish. Okay, we are going to be sending you a handout. And in this webinar handout, you will have all of the information that you need. All of these strategies that we have reviewed here are going to be explicitly in this handout, and you will have information on how to use the sound spelling kit, or how to manage cross-linguistic transfer at the sound spelling level. All right, so this sort of concludes my part, and I would like to open it up for questions or for anything that you might want to ask. So do we have any questions from the audience, Liz?
Yeah, this is Elizabeth.
Sure.
There is a question.
Yes.
From Dinora Sandoval, and she asked, do students with English as L1 transfer their linguistic skills to Spanish as L2 the same way, and vice versa?
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. And again, this cross-linguistic approach goes two ways, so that yes, you can start in English and then do that cross-linguistic towards Spanish. And we have both. We have a handbook in Spanish that shows you that, and we have the English handbook that also shows you that. So in the English handbook, you're going from English to Spanish. And in the Spanish handbook, you're going from Spanish to English. So yes, absolutely. And it's the same process, because you have the transferable letters in English are also the transferable letters in Spanish.
Okay, here's another question for you. What is your best suggestion for bilingual word walls to incorporate this learning?
Okay, so the bilingual word walls to incorporate this learning. Yeah, I love the idea, and I see a lot of teachers now beginning to have their cross-linguistic transfer walls, where they would have the Spanish card on one side and the English card on the other, right? And they would be, let me see, and they would have the words. I'm going to send you pictures of these transfer walls that we have, and they have the little spelling, the little picture cards, the word cards, and they put them up on pocket charts, and you can see the relationship, and the students can actually, I have been in a classroom where the principal walked in and said, okay, can somebody explain what's going on here? And she pointed to the wall, and the students are going, well, this is the T, and this is the sound, and these are words that start on this, and they were able to articulate each one of those vocabulary words, point out that they all started with the one letter, pointed out the cognates, and pointed out the English, and were able to explain to the principal the relationship between these sound spelling systems. And this was a first grade. So yes, you post it, you do a learning wall. Now, a word wall is different. The word walls in Spanish, you want to do the word walls with the letters that are somewhat confusing in Spanish, like the G and the J. Like you may want to do a word wall with the V and the B. You may want to do you might want to do these, they're called las letras tramposas. So word walls in Spanish really address these few sound spelling conflicts or sound spelling, tricky letters. In English, the word walls are usually your sight words that are not very decodable. Okay, do we have another question?
Yes, we do. Can you talk about applying the sound spelling or cross-linguistic transfer to students beyond K through 2? Do you think there's a place for that?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I think there's a huge place for the sound spelling system, these cards, to be able to be used with students that are new to learning English, that are newcomers, the ones that already know their sound spellings in an alphabetical language, in their own language. It's very easy to then compare and contrast using manipulatives. Using these manipulatives, it's very easy for the students to concretely understand how these sounds are being represented by letters and how those letters are the same or different in English. And for the older students, they need to especially look at when English gets a little bit more complex and how you have the different symbols that represent the different letter patterns that represent the spellings and the sounds that they hear. Like for instance, the letter A has about 5 or 6 letter pattern representations. So the students are able to learn those quicker when you're using sound spelling cards. And when you're using the approach that you're comparing and contrasting the sound, is it the same or different? The spelling, is it the same or different? And you're doing it right there at that point of entry.
Okay, thanks. We've had several questions about how generative and applicable cross-linguistic transfer is beyond Spanish and English. So for example, Mandarin English or other world languages.
Yes. Now, of course, this sound spelling kit and the cross-linguistic transfer between English and Spanish and the whole framework for the cross-linguistic transfer using the language subsystems apply to alphabetical languages. So we have to also look at the family of languages and then go there. So like for instance, Mandarin is not an alphabetical language, right? So that has a different set of rules than what I'm talking about here on how we are going to compare and contrast the two languages. What we're talking about here can be done with any alphabetical language, and especially with the alphabetical languages that use the Roman alphabet.
Thank you. Can you also talk about how a teacher might use this tool if they are not bilingual?
Absolutely. Well, bilingual Spanish or if they're monolingual Spanish or monolingual English. Well, absolutely. The cards come in Spanish and in English. So the idea is that the English-speaking student, the teacher is basing her instruction in English, using these cards in English, right? And it's very simple to just hold up the equivalent card in Spanish and say, boys and girls, does it have a green border? What does that green border mean? It means that they're the same, right? That there's the same sound and the same letter is being represented. Now let's say the sound. Let's say the sound of the T in English. So I can actually speak only in English and talk about that relationship. But then again, I just want educators to have the materials they need to be able to do this. We want to be able to have things that facilitate the understanding that I can say, this is a doll. You know, how do you say doll in your language, right? So we are able to really do what research and the guiding principles are asking us to do, to leverage the student's primary language as we're learning English. So absolutely, and the same way goes with Spanish to English. You can do all of this just in Spanish or just in English. The idea is that there's a time in your teaching that you're going to bridge and you're going to explain this that we have learned in Spanish has a certain relationship. It's either the same or it's not the same in English, right? I'm hoping that's answering these questions, but
you're doing an awesome job, Sylvia. There are a couple questions about designated ELD, and what would the role of the sound spelling transfer kit or cross-linguistic transfer be in the context of designated ELD?
Designated ELD, exactly. So in the state of California, designated ELD is we have the framework states that phonics is taught in integrated ELD and in the language, in English language, right? Just like Spanish phonics is taught in Spanish. However, in dual language programs, you can actually, and there's, I should quote it from the framework, there's a line in the framework that says that yes, in dual language programs, you could transfer over and do a little bit of that touching base with the English. And that is an opportunity for cross-linguistic transfer.
Thank you. How about this question? Would the sound spelling transfer kit replace phonics instruction?
Nope, absolutely not. Repeat with me, no. You have your comprehensive language arts curriculum, whatever they may be, and you follow that curriculum. And that is Spanish language arts instruction, and there's English language arts instruction. The sound spelling transfer kit is the first and most innovative materials out there for cross-linguistic transfer, and they are taught during a bridging time, and they are to supplement what you already have in your core curriculum. And so that is why we have the handbooks. They are in alphabetical order, so that if I have, let's say, the benchmark curriculum and I am doing the letter N, I look over here, I go to the letter N, and then during cross-linguistic transfer, during that specific time, that should be maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day, that I'm going to be then discussing, having a dialogue with my students about their bilingualism and about the sound spelling system, and we're just doing a comparison and contrast. And we're talking about the letters, and we're talking about the words, and we're talking about vocabulary, okay? All during that time. Yes.
Okay, we have some questions about how the pacing and the content would look different between kinder, first, and second.
Great question. Okay, pacing is pacing. I'm the kind of person that pacing goes with your students. So you're the one, you as a teacher, as an educator, you're the one that negotiates all of these materials. But of course, in kindergarten, the program, you would emphasize the more playful parts of the program, the more playful routines, a lot of oracy that happens, a lot of the manipulatives with the cards, a lot of the associations and things they can do with these cards, a lot of the thinking that happens. And as you are introducing these letters, you go ahead and you could actually do, if you're very much into like, let's introduce all the letters in Spanish first, and then begin introducing the English letters maybe in the spring. Maybe you want to pace it that way. Maybe you want to pace it so that it's like a transition time or a little bit of time, but 5 or 10 minutes a day. In first grade, the students already have a pretty good foundation. And so there you can get more explicit about the type of comparisons that you do. You are able to then do a little stronger dictados, and maybe you do the spelling a little bit stronger with in context and with, you know, more complex words, and then do that error analysis or that approximation analysis and include the students in thinking about why I spelled it that way and how it's really spelled. And so having those conversations about letter patterns and sounds and in both languages. Although the teacher always stays in the target language, but you can have those conversations about English in Spanish, and you can have conversations about Spanish in English.
Okay, thank you. I think this might be the last question for this webinar.
Okay.
For teachers who are in a dual language program in a 90-10 model, would you teach the English and Spanish speakers students at the same time, or would you divide your transfer time based on native language for the student?
Okay, in a 90-10 program, well, the first thing is, you know, the context factor that's very important here is the students. Who is your population? Number one. Number two, what are the guidelines that you're following in your 90-10 or 50-50 program? You know, the students learn best when they're together, I think, and when, you know, during a transfer time, if you have a designated little bit of time, whether it's at the end of your phonics instruction in Spanish, you can say to the students, okay, in English, we're going to study this, or Mrs. So-and-so is also teaching you about this and that, and she will continue that instruction. Whatever the situation is, the important thing is that you are linking what you have taught to the target language. Now, the students, do we separate them? Do we put them together? I mean, I think that it's dynamic to have them together, because they help each other as experts. That's what I have seen in the classes that I have taught. It's quite a dynamic and cultural situation when the students are actually helping each other and using their bilingual knowledge to do so. We have the Como Se Dice activities that we've learned from Kathy Escamilla, where we've done tea parties where a student has this and another student has another card, and they come up to you and they go, okay, ¿Cómo se dice esto en inglés? And then the partner has to say doll. And then the other partner goes, ¿Cómo se dice esto en español? And they go, okay, rana. And then you switch. ¿Cómo se dice en inglés? ¿Cómo se dice en español? Muñeca. ¿Cómo se dice en inglés? Frog. So, you know, they are able to do this dynamic exchange of language themselves as students. The teacher sort of always stays in their target language, I think, at the early grades anyways.
Wow. Well, Sylvia, thank you. Thank you. Thank you to both you and Liz. I feel like we could go on for much longer in this presentation. There's so much more to share. But what an inspiring, timely, and really hands-on presentation you've given us via webinar. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
We so appreciate it. I think everybody's giving you a big cheer throughout the whole state of California. Bravo, bravo.
Everybody stay safe, stay safe and continue learning. And again, thank you to Gabe and thank you to Benchmark for providing this wonderful opportunity of learning for all of us. And it doesn't stop here. We're going to continue.
We definitely are. What a great way to kick off our CABE 2020 virtual community webinar series. Remember, if you're listening today, the recorded sessions and the handouts Sylvia was mentioning will be on the CABE 20 virtual community website very soon. So be on the lookout for that. And for those of you that are joining us today as well, it'll be in the question and answer section. I believe the link is being put to the handouts as well. For the handouts. But again, the recording and the handouts will be listed for those of you that have access to the CABE 2020 virtual community website. Those that were pre-registered for CABE. I'm really excited to share too that we're going to continue our CABE 2020 virtual community webinar series next Tuesday and Wednesday. On Tuesday, we'll be welcoming Dr. Jim Cummins at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and on Wednesday, Dr. Kathy Escamilla in the afternoon as well. They'll be joining us, and they both are sponsored by Caslon Publications. So we thank Caslon, and they'll be partnering with us to continue this really exciting CABE 2020 virtual community. Again, thank you to Sylvia, thank you to Liz, thank you to Benchmark, and thank you for joining this series. On behalf of our board of directors, our president, Olivia Yaya, our whole CABE team, we really just extend to you wishes for staying safe, be well, and know that we are all truly in this together. We hope that you, through this video conferencing, are feeling the love, the CABE love, just as if we really were together right now in San Francisco. We know that wonderful feeling, and so feel that CABE connection, feel that CABE love. Remember, we are CABE strong. Stay safe, stay well. Please get in touch with us if you have any questions, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Sign up for the session with Dr. Cummins and with Dr. Escamilla next week as well. Thank you so very much, and have a great afternoon.